quantify this phenomenon, and estimates are all over the place, but it seems pretty clear that there are millions of people who were once evangelical who no longer identify that way for one reason or another. Now, they're not all anti Trump. They're not all liberals or Democrats by any stretch of the means, but evangelicalism, it was and is such a massive movement that million ties to it, and many who have left. The other thing I'd point to is some new research from Pew that looks at the religious nones, Nones, which is the group of people who basically say that they aren't religious, that they identify with no religion at all. And that group is now bigger than white evangelicalism, which is a seismic shift. And some of those people certainly come from evangelical backgrounds. And once again, I would also point to the vast and growing number of podcasts and social media channels and groups where people are talking about these themes. There's a real appetite for connection after being part of this community.
You grew up in Kansas City, Missouri, part of a family of 6, 2 sisters and a brother, and you're oldest. How would you characterize your family's faith? There is a scale when it comes to evangelical beliefs. Like, where are they on that scale?
Evangelicalism is such a big movement, and people are all different, right? As with any group. Some people are more devout. Some people go to church less often, although there's a real emphasis on going every week and being really plugged into a church community. That's in the absence of a lot of ritual, like Catholicism or mainline Protestantism would have. I would say that for evangelicals, the ritual is almost just showing up and being part of it. So that was important for my family, attending regularly, praying every night at dinner. Going to Christian school was something that certainly not all evangelical kids do. Not everybody has the means to do that. But that was, for, I think, my parents, a way of protecting us and shaping us too, making sure that we were inculcated in what they called a Christian worldview. And
you're not talking about Sunday school. You're talking about Christian education. So elementary school, middle school, high school, college.
Yeah. I was in private schools from preschool through my bachelor's degree. And, this term Christian worldview is something you see or worldview in particular, is something you see a lot in evangelical literature. There's a real emphasis on this idea that we see the world differently. And really the implication is that those of other faiths see it wrongly. And so it was important that children, that I and my siblings and my peers, it was important to our parents that we be raised with, a literal view of the Bible, with a view of the family that was very traditional, a mother, a father, monogamy, fidelity, purity before marriage, sexual purity before marriage. And it was important that we share those ideas with the rest of the world. I mean, evangelical has built into the word the idea of evangelism. We believed we had the truth and we had a responsibility to share it. And that had both spiritual and often political implications.
What was it like for you to revisit some of your Christian school textbooks?
Some of them were worse than I remembered, to be honest. Some of them included passages that really minimized or ignored some of the ugly history of our country, including slavery. There's a line I quote in one of the sections of the book. It described it in this way. It said, "Southern weather was warm and the slaves stayed healthy." And it presented slavery as sort of a necessary result of the economics of the region, which, reading that now as an adult, and particularly as someone who was taught that slavery is evil, and that God loves everybody, and that we're all children of God, that was really shocking to see it talked about in such casual, callous terms.
I was so struck when I read that you said, like, you were not even aware that you were part of a subculture. What was your media consumption like growing up?
Right. I mean, I would never have articulated it that way at the time. I just believed that the world was fallen and lost and that we were saved and we had the truth. And it was, our mission in life was to share the truth with the world. But for me, most of what I was surrounded with was evangelical literature and media. So, Focus on the Family, which is the organization founded by James Dobson many decades ago, which he's no longer affiliated with. But it's been instrumental in evangelical culture, and it's certainly not the only group, but it's hard to overstate how important Focus on the Family and its offshoots has been. Focus on the Family produced magazines for teenagers. There was this magazine called Brio Magazine, which is sort of an alternative to like Teen Vogue or Magazine. They produced many, many books about parenting, many books about marriage, and there was a whole political arm as well. The Family Research Council was sort of an offshoot of Focus on the Family, which exists today and is a very powerful group in the Christian right. So we were listening to Christian radio, we were watching Christian television, Christian movies. I was allowed to sometimes listen to what we called secular radio, rock and roll, but it was heavily discouraged. And if I was caught listening to it too much, my parents would shut it down.
I chuckled when I read that growing up, your dad referred to NPR as National Perverted Radio.
Yeah, and I noted this in the book, but he doesn't remember that. So maybe I misremembered it, but I remember it. The sense was just that the secular world was full of sin and was lost. And so really my whole world was shaped by those influences. And I knew very few people who were not evangelical Christians.
Your grandfather, he was a very pivotal, important person in your life and coming into your own beliefs and deconstructing your beliefs, as you put it. He was a highly educated man who was also gay, and the distance your family placed between him had a profound effect on you. It's almost like the distance did the opposite of what your parents were trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I think that's really true. They were trying to protect me from him. I think they loved him in their way, of course, but he was not a believer. He was, he was highly educated. He loved to read. He was a neurosurgeon. And, I think I remember a number of times when, my dad tried to talk to him about, becoming Christian, and my grandpa wasn't interested. And that was always perplexing to me growing up because, we thought that we were told that this was clearly the truth. You just had to look in the Bible. We knew all the verses that backed up our belief.
Oops, somebody disconnected it again. I don't know why they do that. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to Dreamy Dreamland with your Sensei Al Bob. So I'm cuddled in my neighbor's driveway, hanging off his YouTube. And what that lady was talking about was exactly what I am surrounded by, right? So instead of viewing them as, hicks or stupid or wrong, no. I go to all the different churches and go in fellowship, right? And so I've been doing this now for 18 months, right? And every Sunday I wake up early, I read the Bible, I pray, I write a little, and then I head out and go to the Ku Klux Klan Southern Baptist born again whoop-de-doo, right? And it's exactly what, evangelical, right? And those, right? But everything is like, there is no decorations. It's just a white wall. There's nothing to, distract you from the truth, right? And then there is the Methodist. I own everything. These are all people who are Methodists or Episcopalians or some, WASP motif. And they don't quit the Bible that much. They just said that, we're rich. And because we're rich, God loves us. And that's it, right? And then the other group is the Roman Catholic pagans. And now they got decorations, everything. They got the you name it, they got it, right? The crosses, the little statues, and every, especially the KKK Baptists would say, see, they're pagans, they're worshiping idols. Well, so does those guys. They worship their football team, they worship their basketball team, they worship their whatever. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So I've been doing this now for 18 months. And basically, I was sent to these folks by God, basically, because, again, I'm kind of blind. The glasses kind of, give it away. And I was having my eyes operated. Like I'm going to have them operated on again. And it's not like, oh, they operated on it and then, oh, it's all fixed. No, it's like they do it and then my eyes kind of work for a year or two, and then I got to have it done again, right? And I have lots of things wrong with me that are similar, right? And I don't let, unless it's really, unless God intervenes, says, oh, you need to go get that, basically, I let God take care of everything. I have let go of my concerns about my life, right? And so this Sunday, so I go and, in fellowship or Bible study, and now I read the Bible every day, 5, 6, 10 times. I pray probably 20 times a day, I like to see, Muslims pray 5 times a day, on, purpose, doesn't matter what they're doing, they pray, right? That they're little, and not only do they pray like me, I pray, I'm like right here. So right here, we're going to pray right here. Lord, bless us here. As you say, when more than 2 come together, there we are. And I think, no, I don't know how many people are here, but I'm here. And I want to thank you for everything you do, everything you've done for me in my whole life, right? If people would step back and like, oh, look, you got murdered in first grade by a Nazi nun. Oh, that was, and she broke your jaw and made you blind in one eye and deaf in one ear. And, made it so you couldn't barely breathe and couldn't talk and stuttered. Oh, isn't that terrible? Well, actually, it was a great gift, God, because I had a cardinal as my godfather. And when that happened, that girl got, and she was put there by the Vatican. 1 million Nazis got out of Europe at the end of the war. It was called the Rat Line. And we had the best of the Rat Line. We had what was known as Operation Paperclip. And, we brought a few hundred, we brought Werner von Braun and his boys. And no, we brought over 1 million Nazis. Not like, guys who fought on the line. No, guys who, were bureaucrats and scientists and engineers that manifested the National Socialist Party, right? Economically, socially, and what we are seeing in our politic right now. And it's not like we haven't been there before. Right when was in his thing in 1933, getting into German, the Reichsmark, we had this guy named Father Coughlin, right? Catholic priest that was spewing more disgusting stuff than Donald Trump even knows how to, and he was right up there with Adolf, right? Now Donald, he's just reading the script. You can see when his his last big rally, his teleprompter went offline, so he was unintelligible, right? And he said things like, if I don't win, it's going to be a bloodbath. It's like, and what's his name? Robert De Niro was on Jimmy Kimmel, and he said that guy's just a beep, moron, And so I don't really curse, but I use other words. I instead of saying beep moron, I would say fracking moron, right? So and so say we all. So the bottom line is everyone is brainwashed in some manner, right? And it's all up to you to step back from it, right? So I was talking to a friend of mine last night, and we were talking about being, what's the term? There's Epicurean, and then the other guys who like cut everything away. They make their life. Marcus Aurelius was a good example of that. And there were a number of Greek philosophers were a member of that. It starts with an S, right? And let's see. Let's see if we can find this little conversation we had.
Dr. Charles Stanley walks us through scripture to show us how to see the cross in a new light. The gift of the cross. Order yours today at intouch.org/store.
In our spiritual journey, we often...
Like you said, to be a slave, to turn your will and your life over is basically to say, I'm going to do all these things I'm committed to. But I will leave the driving to you.
That's right.
And you, the gods, to quote Charles Bukowski, the gods will offer you chances. Know them. Take them. So when the email, hey, come to this place and interview, fine. I wound up, asking God, like, I'm not sure I should head in this direction. Can you help me out? Puts the guy right in front of me. He took to his shelter and I spent like about 4 hours with him, and I felt great, and it had nothing to do. I heard this somewhere. When you want to find out like what it is you want to be when you grow up, or what kind of job or whatever, if you can do the thing and time slips away, then that's the direction.
Yep. When you're not waiting the bell. So, he's one of my students, right? He came to me through this show, and he came to me, and anyone who wants to get a hold of me at the Dude Awake 42 at Gmail, we can have more of a private conversation. And so that's what we've had over at least 2 years, right? And like everyone else, he had his issues, and he was letting his issues get the better of him, and he was turning his issues into his God. And that's what we all do. If you're an alcoholic, a drug addict, addicted to anything, that's your God, And when I was a shrinky boy, I did a lot of working with people who had that issue, right? And couldn't see it. I don't have a problem with alcohol. I can stop anytime I want, I'm not drunk at work. So we all have that. We all have our addictions of some sort or another, right? And unless, so I journal all the time. That's why I write, it's part of my, I journal, and then I click away, and then before I know it, I've written a few pages, and I go, oh, look at that. That's kind of good. Cut and paste that, and move it over here, and put it in one of my novels. And virtually everyone I come across, why people go, why do you put up with that? How, like John Birmingham, the great people go, why do you spend any time with that guy? Why do you talk about him? Why do you even look at just all the stuff he did to you? Well, basically, every time he threw me out, those 32 times, something way better than being with him happened. An amazing adventure, an amazing thing. Just like my friend was talking about. He was talking about, he met a person who was, totally addicted and heading towards death. And he, instead of walking by, he spent 4 hours talking to him and then helping him find another direction to go. That's what I do every day. Not as singularly like that, because I get involved with people who either they really need me, or they will get something from me. I have my 3 little rules of my guideposts, and one is doctor, do no harm. Back in the day when people called me the doctor, do no harm, right? Because you can, I have to deal with the medical model a great deal. Every month I go, have to do something with them. least 3 or 4 times a month, right? So I get to see the medical model reel up. And in America, it is falling apart, right? Even for the statistics show it, the United States, right? Richest country in the world has our, you know, our ability to, grow older and older and older was going up until around 1972. And then it kind of plateaued and then, right. And we are precipitously dropping, and not just in the poor black, you know, compromised communities. No, rich people are within the statistical motif. They're dying as quickly. They're not living as old, and if they are, they're not, like my brother, or me. I gained an extra 200 pounds living and working in the desperate corporate lawyer world for about, let's see, 88 to 2014. What is that? 14 plus another 10, like 30 years, right? So I was, when I did that, 88, I was like 48 years old, I guess, somewhere like that. Or 38, let's see, 50, 60, 70, yeah, 38. So I was 38 years old. And I was about 200, and I was about the weight I am now, right? I'm right now, I'm probably, I'm just a tad under 200. And, but my little bounce, it's like my blood pressure and my blood sugar. I have this homeostasis. So I'm like between 198 and 128. I mean, 228. That's my little window of weight. And my blood sugar is about between 99 and 124. That's my homeostasis. My blood pressure is usually, some 18 over 60. I mean, 118 over 60, or 131 over 60 something. So I have this little homeostasis. So stay in that, I'm good to go, right? If I kind of, and I can like, woo, real easy without even noticing it, right? That's why I have to stay conscious. So that's why I have go see the medical guys. I've got myself wired into about 4 different doctors, depending on what neck of the woods I'm in, and they all do different things. I have a bone doctor, a endocrinologist doctor, I have GP, I have podiatrist, I have an eye person. What other doctors do I have? That's about it. I mean, I have other specialists, but I don't go to them all the time. Those people I go to, and my GP, they were a great HMO nonprofit. This guy, got to know him really good. He was my doctor. After COVID, he just couldn't take it anymore, and because he saw what was going on to the big picture of medicine, and he did not want to be part of it. Right. So it's like when COVID came out, and he said, you have to get these shots or the state will cut you off of health care, because you wired yourself in such a, if I just did what the state, it's like, next month I have to go in front of the Spanish Inquisition of the state I live in to justify them giving me $47 a month of food stamps. And they used to have the social service place in my county seat, and I go down there and talk. And they used to have 40 people working there. They had social workers, psychologists, all kinds of people. Now they have 2, right? And one of them is always someone who isn't from there, and they're just kind of a temp, right? And otherwise, you walk into this. You used to walk in this big room. Vestibule, and it was all open, and you could walk back to the offices and go see who you wanted to. Now you come in, and it's just a bulletproof, plastic box, right? And there are these cubicles over here with a computer, and then there is a thing where you enter a portal, that you get into their system. And that's how you deal with it. Don't talk to anybody. You had to do that. Now, the law states, guy like me who can barely see, can't type, or type that way. Someone has to come out from behind the plastic and help you. And it's always the person who is, the person just newly there, right? But I used to be able to go in there and know the people, and I would have this thing that they'd mail me. That person said everything's the same. I said yep, and so she would go in computer, and then she'd say, "Here, sign this." I'd sign it, and that would be it. And then I'd have food stamps for 6 months. And then do it again. It used to be when I first got them. It was then once I got them, period. But about a year and a half after I got them, they said, "Well, every 6 months you got to check in with us." Oh, okay. And yet, when the rich people came here, Colonel Sanders, he went down and lied to them, and he said he had 10 kids, and he was getting 700, and he drove up in a Tahoe or some big fancy gas guzzling monster, and parked there, and went in and signed up and said that he had 10 kids, and he got $700 of food stamps. Me, I told the truth, and I get $47 and have to go through the Spanish Inquisition and so I keep instead of so a person comes on and obviously angry person who's doing something that I want to do, and as my friend said, if you find a job that you can enjoy doing, and see, that's what I've done my whole fracking life. Electricity is my main thing. That's my worldview. I relate to everything electrically. It's like I can see the matrix. I can see all those. I can see your energy in your body. I mean, that's what made me a good healer. I can look at your electrical problem. This weekend, one of my churches had a big chili cook-off, right? And the one they had before, I went to, but a friend was visiting, so we just went to it. And they had all these 100-foot extension cords to go from the plug to someone's heater for their chili and their crock pot. And the thing would be coiled, so the voltage drop. So that crock pot, even though it's plugged in the wall, it was not heating up at all. So I went in. They had all this stuff, and they had it all. And I just went in with this guy when he said, "Oh, we're going to have the thing." I said, "When do you have it?" "Today." I said, "When are you going to have it?" He said, "About 5 o'clock." I said, "Well, it's 2 o'clock. Let's go down and see how they're doing." And so, the minions were getting it ready and making it look so pretty. And they did the same thing. They had all these long extension cords, and my friend's a contractor, and I said, "So, hey, you must have some shorter ones." And he goes, "Yeah." I said, why don't we trade? Once you take all the long ones, they're probably better for you, and the short ones give to the church. And so I went around and just plugged things in. So because they only had one circuit, they had 3 outlets, one circuit, well, maybe 2 circuits, but 3 outlets. And when I had it before, they had virtually all of the crock pots on one circuit, so they just kept popping all the time. So they never could warm up. They just hit the circuit breaker. It would barely get pop, right? So I distributed it as evenly and put all those short things in there. So, all 30 of those crock pots got super hot, and everyone's chili was at the same level, because there were a couple of those crock pots last time that got it pretty warm. And but everyone else's was cold. Eating cold chili, so now it's nice, steamy hot, and so that was the one little thing I did. So I plugged it, and the lady said, "You got all the outlets?" I said, "Listen, I roughed it out. It'll work perfectly. You decorate it any way you want, "Oh, okay." And so instead of me fighting with her, I gave her permission to do whatever you want. And the guy and I went off, and we watched a little basketball. We talked a little Bible, and we went back. And he makes really nice country things, right? He makes these plaques with all kinds of great biblical sayings, and he really is an artist. So and I help him, right? I'm good at burning things, right? So I artistically burn the wood, and he puts it together, and then there's this other guy who is a total, um, what would you call it, hillbilly. I mean, just. And this guy's pushing 90. And when he was a basketball phenom. And so, the main thing he's got, his thing in the basketball hoop. And my buddy was his buddy in high school, and they would go around this part of the country and play really good. They were like the Harlem Globetrotters of the hillbillies, right? And these guys are in their 80s and 90s. And all I do is stand up and do this, right? They have to run around me, and they do 3-point shots, 40 feet away from where the 3-point shot is done on TV. These guys are amazing. So anyway, the three of us make stuff together. So we put a bunch of that stuff in his truck, and we brought it to give to folk at the cook-off, and because they had a lot of little things that you could win, and because they were raising money for the church, right? So anyway, we did that, and that was really nice. So all of these churches, I've been doing this now 18 months, I fit in. People who are sitting there in the pews, they have really got, and I come early and I talk to them, how you doing and what's going on? And they tell me their problems. Now that's what the preacher should be doing. Now he's up in his office getting his thing ready. Whenever he comes to the Bible studies, he comes with like 3 or 4 books, right? And whenever, and the guy who's teaching always kind of throws him a question, and he pulls out the books and he reads it. Me, I talk straight off I talk in parables. I say, I don't quote the book, I say it, right? So the guy who teaches is like, totally sexually in love with Billy Graham. He quotes him, he goes on about him, he's right, and he's the best, since Jesus is it. Billy Graham, right? And then there's Jerry Falwell, right? So I was coming to, I got up in the morning and that Sunday morning and prayed, and we're getting towards Easter. And so I was reading the Bible, and I was reading the little thing they have that we our study guide. And I got myself all prepared to go talk about it. And I started praying, right? And I'll paraphrase the prayer that came to me. And said, Lord, thank you for this blessing of fellowship. When 2 of us are together, you are here, and you are here now with us, now in presence. Your consciousness is connected to ours through your faith in our ability to love you. Yes, we make mistakes. Yes, we sin because we are a body. Our body is easily tempted by sin. And Satan cannot make us do anything. When people say, oh, the devil made me do it. No, we do it, but we are tempted. We don't have to let ourselves go into temptation and into sin. So I went on and on like that about our relationship with God, where we have to be a slave, where we have to be. And so the guy, you heard my student talking, and he likes, I just kind of close my eyes and let it go. And you heard him, he's got a different style, but he has so gotten away from all of his problems. Now they're there, and I keep telling him to write them down, and he's doing a good job at being introspective, and that's when we talk. And all these people, I have about 100 folk that I just call up, right, who came to me through the Dude Awake 42 at Gmail. Anybody who wants to get a hold of me, be nice if some of you guys commented. And if you want to throw anything, I live on $400. A few more dollars would be nice. I don't need it, but it would be nice, right? I live in a material world. It'd be nice, right? And I go to these restaurants so I can talk to you, right? And so, that cup of coffee or that little whatever I get, just so I can rent the little space at the table so I can talk to you. It'll be nice if you threw. And you guys used to be pretty dependable. I used to be able to get at least $100 a month out of you guys, and now someone about 2 months ago sent me something, so it does work. But pay all my digital everything. Why is there only how many people watching? 2. But see, I'm all about quality rather than quantity, right? Because most people who have this, and if they are under, a few K a show, they basically have bots that are creating their audience and their likes and all the rest. Me, not at all, because I'm talking to you, that one of you. That there's 2 of you. See, when 2 are together, God's with us, right? That's what I'm doing. I am dropping, the shamanic pebble into the World Wide Web's pond, right? So everything that's going on around us, like yesterday's show, I played a bunch of interesting things that you can go back and listen to. And I do this for you, right? I don't do it for me. You don't have to do it. It's no skin off my nose. I enjoy talking to you guys, as I enjoy writing, as I enjoy reading the Bible. I mean, I wouldn't do anything if I didn't enjoy doing it, because then it's against the grain. And God wants us to be within God's grain, right? He doesn't want us to be suffering to go to church. He wants us to love going to church. And virtually all the churches I go to, most people could easily not be there, as I could easily not be there. So we come, right? And that's why I come a little early and talk to the folks who are there, because I try to make it enjoyable, comfortable, right? Because mostly I will make a comment or two about the weather or whatever is going on around us, and then let them talk, right? I just let them talk. Now I can talk up a storm, right? Like right now, because I basically put myself in a shamanic state, and I let God talk through me. Not like I'm a puppet, but I am. And why I play that scholastic guy who always gets, I can't take it. You're such a bullshit, blah, 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 blah. And what's amazing is that guy, everything that he goes on about me, all you do is talk. You're talking, blah, 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 blah. And he talks more, right? And he goes, it's like a reading of a crystal ball, the tea leaves, blah, blah, blah. That's one, it's everyone else's fault than his, right? And I'm excited for you, because he is such, he's like John Birmingham. He is the canary in the coal mine of liberal academia. Let's see. Howdy, I'm not a. Yes, so Jamie's not a bot showing his presence here. Anyway, here it is. So Jamie, what do you think about what's going on? What's going on in your neighborhood? What's going on in your neighborhood that represents the seeming picture of the world's catastrophe? Because, from my opinion, it's just the same old same, right? I see nothing different, right? Things change and they always stay the same. That's why I loved New York. Was always my hometown, because I could leave it. I went between 68 and 88, I would leave New York and be away for months, years, and come back. And people would, it was like I could slide right back. I would go call up a few contractors. I would go over to the electric supply place. I'd do a few things. And I would have money. I would prime the pump and have a money flow, and I'd be doing stuff, right? And then I go talk to people who were involved in community activities, and I'd be involved, right? And I would go to a couple of churches. Kaufman's a church up there in Harlem, and the thing that took over after Malcolm X, and I'd be involved. I go to the Union Hall, and I would go upstairs to where the nonprofits, the Boys Athletic League, Girls Vacation Fund, their Blue Cross health care system, that was for the union, and I would get involved. And then I'd be plugged in. I'd have a nice cash flow coming in, and there was always an abandoned building I could go into, and there were always my mentor, Adam Purple, who was like one of the original bohemians, right? He was a war hero, and he came back from the war and realized how screwed things were, and he became a commander in the Navy. He was too young to join the military. So the Coast Guard, the Merchant. He became a commander, a captain in the Merchant Marines, and he was so good at what he did that the Navy said, we need you in because before the war, they had before Pearl Harbor, they had sent in all the stuff on ships, and so they were protecting them. So they needed a naval kind of guy, but was still a Merchant Marine guy, and so he wasn't ordained officer, but it was like being in the high school cadets of the Navy, right? Officers thing. But he was a commander a real commander, like at 19 before Pearl Harbor, and anyway, so he was truly amazing. Truly, he was skilled at right, and if he didn't have that skill, he would find a guy like me who did have that skill, and then he would say, "Hey, do this for me." So anyway, he was my teacher. So he was a guy who taught me all about the Merchant Marines. He's a guy who showed me how to ride the rails. I met this guy. How old was I? Probably 11, and I was working for Grandpa, and it was great working for Grandpa because he would just put me on a project and said, "Get it done, whatever," and I would just go and do it, right? But if I wanted to, I'd be working on something, got hungry, I'd just go wherever I was and go get a sandwich and sit down someplace nice. So one day, I was working off of McDougal Street for the Italian men's gun club on McDougal Street, a mobster place, like Tony Soprano place. And it was a beautiful, 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 like 19th century building, and it had tube and peg, and they had a fire, right? So the guy who was, something pro, the guys who, when you have a flood or a fire, they come in and fix it. Well, this guy did that, but he didn't work for any corporation, but he did do that. And so I went in, and I pulled the meter and then put in temporary power, so the fire stuff could be demoed, and they could rebuild the place, right? And I wired it, right? So I was there on McDougal Street, and I would and it was great because it was like they had an Italian restaurant and that's where the fire was, in the kitchen, and it was electric fire, and they were pushing, too many things plugged into one outlet. So anyway, it was great because those guys were still there, it was still their clubhouse. The guys, got rid of the burnt out stuff, and they were in another room, and they, were had another, not kitchen, but a place that Grandma was making the sauce for spaghetti, and it was great. I was working there, and it's like, they were taking care of me, and they were like just amazed that I was like 11 years old and rewiring their whole place. And these were real mobsters, the stuff you hear, like the Teflon Don. No, these guys were above them. They were like, you know, grandfather, Godfather. And so anyway, like what was Mike's? See, that's when you know you're old, because when you think of something that you want to say and it kind of goes over here, finale. See, and that's how you do it. If you can't grab a hold of that, like I was talking to a guy, telling him, about Allen Ginsberg, who's for the life of me, grab that name. And so this guy was so into poetry, he kind of went through the whole list. I said, well, that guy came to our pod. Like, oh yeah, I know that guy. And then he had Allen. I said, oh, that's it, And I described him so well: the black curly hair, the glasses, the beard, the whole thing. And so, anyway, and that's how I got into theater too, because right across the street was the Man of La Mancha that had played there for like 1,000 years, right? It's this little teeny theater on McDougal Street, and all they had was a Man of La Mancha, right? Well, when you got something good, why, and it had about a 300 seat, and they would pack that thing every time they do it. So 300 seats. So I rewired that place. So I was starting to do, and so that guy turned me on to Herbert Berghoff and Uta Hagen on 10th Street. So that whole McDougal, see, there's two little Italy's in Manhattan. The one on the east side, where Thomas Street, kind of near where Luna is, near Canal Street in Chinatown, and the one over that's near Spring Street and 6th Avenue. And so one's St. Anthony and one is, St. Gennaro's, right? So anyway, total mob. And that's where the mob is running the church, right? Because when I had the St. Anthony's Festival or St. Gennaro's Festival, it was like they moved Las Vegas and they had gambling in the basement of the thing. And all the old ladies between 35 and 60 were in spangly one-piece, bathing suit with hair showing every place out of their body. Anyway, so, and they would be the croupiers, right? And this is the world I lived in. And how could you not love working and living? And, whereas you look at John Birmingham, he was stuck in this little cul-de-sac world, going to a kind of public, very white, very bourgeois, middle class to upper middle class lifestyle. That's his parents. His parents are millionaires, but they're basically bourgeois middle class people, And John wants to be an A-lister, so he showed up, and like in 5th, 6th grade, he was a little chunky, so everyone made fun of him, and he is stuck in 5th grade. And then about 7th grade, he could ride, he could do things on a skateboard. So, everyone said, well, you're cool. So he was with the skateboard kids, and he disenfranchised himself with them, because with John, all you have to do is look at John. And so the stories I tell you, you are enamored with, because what it does, it's not truly about me. That story I'm telling you is about you. When I talk about the old crone, when I talk about, New York City, when I talk about any of this, it's about you, right? So when I'm in all these churches here around me, and I'm talking stories from the Bible, and then put it in a context to what our lives are around us, people, the audience really likes to hear that, right? And I don't do it in excess, right? I don't do it during the service. I'm not there during the service, right? But in fellowship, I do. And I don't, I basically sit there in prayer. And when the teacher says something, and the guy goes, yo, and I go, oh, yeah, what about this? And I kind of, spend all of less than a minute to hit on it. And so this guy's been talking for an hour and a half. Everyone is like, constant. And then I speak up for less than a minute and a half, and I've just hit the whole story of what our lesson's supposed to be out of the park. And everyone's like, they're not clapping and standing and cheering, but their eyes light up, you know. And I look at them and they smile. And so that's why I'm accepted in that church. But this Sunday, so before I showed up, I kind of was praying, and I had this prayer, and I kept saying it, which I just said to you, about God's love, and when more than two of us are together, there you are. And so I came in and I talked to the guy. And I said, "Can I have do the opening prayer?" And he goes, "Sure, but sit down here." And he goes, "So explain to me, you know, what you think God is, and what is Christianity, and why you're at this church, right?" Now, I basically said, well, God is unconditional love, and Jesus unconditional forgiveness, and you have to get to and God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit are one God, not three gods, and Jesus is not Sonny Boy, In the Bible, you see, at the very beginning, they're talking about the Messiah. That's Jesus. And the only way we can have redemption is through God's unconditional love. That's always there. It's never a question of we have to do this. There's nothing we can do to make it better. What we have to do is be, a slave to God. He goes, "A slave? What is it? What, a slave to God?" I said, "Yes." Meaning that sin is when anything you do, God's not involved. That's sin, you know. And it's not jerking off. It's not screwing lots of people. It's not stealing, lying, cheating. Sin is you could do all of those things, and if you were doing it with God, it'd be okay. Because in the Bible, look at Moses. He killed a guy, right? And this was so like this guy. And he goes, "Well, how did you?" Well, and he goes, "So, what church did you go to as a boy?" I said, "Well, I was born into," and I'm telling you this story because this is my where I came from, my pedigree. I said this. I said, "You want to know my pedigree? Here it is." And I'm not, I don't normally tell people this, but you personally asked me this after I explained what I thought, what I believe. I believe what what God's faith in me, my reflection of God is what I just told you, right? And it's in the Bible. What quote? No, that's in the Bible. It's you to, if you want to know the quote, you look it up. I'll give you the general direction. But then he goes, "So how did you get to this belief?" And I said, "You want to know my pedigree? So here's my pedigree. How much time do I have up here?" Oh, it did long enough. So I was born into an Irish Catholic, Vatican, Roman Catholic family. My mother was Irish, right? And her mother was German, Steinbeck. John Steinbeck was my second cousin. And so my mother's Irish family were almost Dutch, meaning they were Irish folk, and they were, all when England, back in, 9th century, went in and took over Ireland to be its, its slave race. That was their first slave crew for the Irish. So in a slave thing, you have a pyramid scam. I mean, they're Irish middle managers, and so my mother's family were those Irish middle managers. They were Romans basically, right? And they had their whole thing was in Europe, but they were Irish, right? I mean, and they were there along the Sicily. There are these islands out there off of Sicily that are Celtic, and that was my mom's, right? And so you hear this term, white Italians, meaning they have blonde hair, blue eyes, really white. I look Irish, right? Anyway, that's where her, way back before Jesus, these guys, that's what her folks were. And they were Celts and they were Druids, right? And they were poets, right? and they were magicians. They were like the old crow, right? So that's where my mom came from. And then, as the years went by, and Jesus, and then Roman Empire and Holy Roman Empire, and then we have the Crusades, blah blah blah. And what happened was those folks kind of got brought into the greater town through Venice, and didn't stay there long. They went over to Denmark and were like bankers. And then, before the fall of the Roman Empire, so they're Irish. They look Irish. They still have all this, Gaelic stuff in them, because those little islands were like, whoa. If you were brought up there, your gene pool was from there. You were like, whoa. You were a druid, right? But you could do anything, and that's what tinkers are, right? The Roma. Now, the Roma is something totally different, but those folks on those islands were akin to that, right? So my mother's father's folks went over to um, Denmark and were bankers, and then ended up back in Dublin representing, that banking crew. But because they were so Irish, they fit in. So they were, in that pyramid scheme of control, they weren't middle managers. They were up here. They had the nice house. They actually had windows. The English and the Romans, and when they went into Ireland, and they basically made Dublin, because that was the best. It was right. It was the sweet spot between going towards North America, and this before Christopher Columbus by at least 400 years. But they knew it was over there because it was just right from Ireland, from Dublin. It's from the West Coast, from Limerick, from Limerick to Iceland. I used to go with guys when I lived in this little fishing village, Glendore. I would go on their fishing boats, and we go out there, and they weren't fishing because these guys. This was during the time of the 80s when everyone thought nuclear war was going to happen. And Glendore, you wanted to live in Europe and survive. Glendore was as far away from. No one's going to drop an atomic bomb on them. There was no strategic anything, no nothing, no submarine pens, no nothing, right? And they were way off on the west end of that. And so the way the wind blew was from the Gulf of Mexico towards Ireland, right? So the west coast of Ireland was like Florida, right? It was like unbelievable. Palm trees, the Ring of Kerry, which are these peninsulas that stick out into the Atlantic. I'm sure they built nightclubs and hotels on that place. They like totally whacked Ireland. But anyway, nobody was there. It's just from my whole idea of how I existed. That's how I stumbled into a Trinity, and I fit in. And my teacher Archie, who was the old crone, was his teacher, and he told her about me. That's how I met her. But if you're on the west coast of Ireland, in that little town of Glendore, and Skibbereen is its county seat. It's in that county, right near. It's like further, I guess, east of or north, further north um, from Skibbereen. So anyway, little fishing village, and everybody in there were like Italians and a lot of Germans, a lot of Swedes, and they were all well educated, and they were all living there because two things: A, they could get on the dole, and B, it was if nuclear war happened, it was the most survivable place because the air that we would be breathing would be coming from the Gulf of Mexico and would have to go across the Atlantic for about 4,000 miles. So a lot of rain, and it all goes in the sea. So by the time it got to us, we weren't going to die, and no one was going to bomb us. So that was the most survivable place. And that was, the old crone lived up on top of the mountain up there. And her farm, which is way up on top of there, was just on the other side was, I think, where our friend here, Jamie lives, right? people want to, oh, guys, remember to put it in capitals. People want to complete everything, and some people out caught up with needing to suffer. Right. Suffering is if you don't know what to do in this material world, it's down there somewhere. Now I'll have to clean my whole car out to find that. Yeah. Oh no, there it is. Put it away. See, the thing is, if you got something and it has a place to live, put it there. Don't just like lay it on something. Put it so it's safe, right? And now I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to think, oh, I had to clean the whole car out to find my. No. So, anyway, so we would go out. So the teacher guy at our church was going on about how he gets seasick. He went out. He loves to go down to the coast in North Carolina, where all the rich people go. I forgot the name of that place. And when I used to hang out, there was nobody, right? That's where the poor people went, right? And I used to go with a rake and rake oysters. And they went, what are you doing? Because when I was a little boy out in Long Island and the Great South Bay, a ton of oysters. Anyway, not anymore, totally polluted. Death pond. From North Africa would come because it was just right over there, and they would have hash. Right? They would pick it up, and these guys would transport it for other guys, right? So we get the hash and everything else, not just hash, but everything else, and we would take it not to Skibbereen, our home little town, but this other little jetty that was over there near the peninsulas, the 5 peninsulas there. And there would be another bigger, faster, groovier boat and sometimes submarines, and we would offload there. And they would obviously CIA, and probably obviously, we were basically laundering their money. Anyway. I was in a seminary. They were in nunnery. I was the only guy who they looked at and goes, yes, I want to hang out there. Not these other morons. And so, and these girls would have, there was some, Teresa, and I went to this Catholic summer school, like in New York City, and because I had gotten thrown out of the seminary, I mean, they nearly killed me, and the cardinal said to me, "Well, you can't go back there." And he said, "I thought you'd be good, really good at, for as long as I've known you, and I baptized you. You have this great skill of talking truth to power without being threatening. These guys are so A, have no power, B, fearful of everything. When you talk to them, they want to kill you. That's exactly, I'm not saying I'm Jesus Christ, but or John the Baptist, but all those guys who fell into that run, they could talk to power, but when they talk like, they talk truth to power, that once he kicked the money changers out of the temple, and they're putting down palms, and he's going to be our poster boy, and we'll make more money, and that's Donald Trump, and that's Biden, and that's you know um, Tucker Ferguson, that's Elon Musk. These are all poster boys. That's micro penis Billy Boy. All of these people. They don't serve anything but themselves, right? So when you see John on the show, John is this poor little canary, beat up canary, stuck in the coal mine of our society of fear and anger, and that's why you see what he does, right? I mean, he has it in him, and in the Bible, they talk about how your heart is this disease thing. Well, our heart, cream cheese between our ears. That's our brain, like gray matter, right? That's just a random access memory, right? For the stuff that's coming in through your eyes and your nose and your mouth and your ears. But everything else, we have, our whole body is this gigantic consciousness web. And this part here, you could cut it off and throw it away. And if you had all the mechanisms, that's why a lot of people stay alive after brain dead, because their spirit's keeping them going. Now your heart is like just a car battery. It's just the your hard drive. So garbage in, garbage out, right? So that's why your heart can be infected with hate and self-loathing and violence, right? I just look at the world. But when you connect all of the sensory, the best place to go to is your gut, your colon. You got 18 billion little other creatures that are like antennas to this consciousness. Boy, I just had a gut feeling about this. So all the stories I tell you, all the people I bring into the stories, like John Birmingham, and why he's a repetitive return character, because he is the character that just keeps on giving. You just look at him and you see. That's why people can't stand him, because they see the mirrored image of who they are in John. And poor John doesn't have a clue. He thinks that if he's an A-lister, if you want to, it's not hard to be an A-lister. It really isn't. Meaning, I know a lot of A-listers, and they basically said, "Oh, I had this talent." So I was around theater a lot, and in high school, I ran the theater department, right? Because I was the only guy. This is kind of fun. This is better than sitting in study hall. This is more fun. But I was in an all boys school, right? But when we would do these plays, we wouldn't just do them for our school. We would go into these competitions, like the Columbia Broadcasting. They had one for literature and theater, and we would go to and the place that had the championship was just like right over there. It was Dartmouth. It was right near whatever college that is, at the base of Mount Washington in New Hampshire. And so we would go over there at least once a month, and all these college girls, and they would, "Oh, you're cute. You want to have some coffee?" I learned that when a girl says you want to have some coffee, that means you want to have sex. You want a blowjob. Anyway, and I was like, I remember. So we did this, and because of that, we had there was another place in New Hampshire, Keene, New Hampshire, had a college, and they too. We would go in and do theater there, right? And we do workshops and stuff like that. So I had a lot of training. So I really enjoyed it. I went mostly for the girls, right? Because the guys were either gay and didn't know it, or just did it like me originally to get out of study hall. But they were not, because the guys I went to school were so rich, they didn't know how to have relations. They were like Donald Trump. They were, we would go out when we would go home. We would go from New Hampshire to down to Boston to go to the airport there, and have the privates waiting for them, right? Me, I had to get on Eastern Shuttle, right? And these guys would stay because their parents didn't care whether they came home or not. So they had money, and they'd have a limo, and we'd get out of the bus, and they'd either go up and get on their jet, or they would get on the limo. And these guys had so much money. Like the guys in my class, Perry Dye, parents owned Seagrams. Alex Orb, U.S. Steel. Uh, you know, Eddie Merrill, Ricky Lynch, Merrill Lynch, New York City Stock Exchange. Who else? The guy Hobart. All of the machines in food processing. Right, they owned half of all of food processing. Right, and so these guys were my buds. Right, now I could have I was there. I was the guy that my nickname was K9 because I was their guard dog. I could see what was going on, and so whenever we would go out and do something, I would see what was, we better go over here instead of over there because, and so that was my thing, K9. And they all got drunk out of their minds, and I never drank. They did tons of drugs. I never did any drugs. And and individually, we'd be hanging out, and I would talk about stuff that they would like. I just one, you know, friend whose parents would send. My parents gave me no money. I'm at the school, and they made you buy everything, right? You got your room, and you got your meal, and you got your education. But if you wanted to go down to the general store, your parents were supposed. I was out of the house because I was. When they got me out of the house at 6 months, and grandma, I remember and I would go home to my parents, my family, several weasels, and my dad, he had hypoglycemia, and he was a triple Virgo, Italian, Sicilian, and and he was a bird colonel in the airport. You ever seen Kate Santini? That was my dad's hero. But he never hit my mom because my mom would have killed him, which is poison, right? So my dad was more scared of my mom. Plus, my dad was smart enough to know that my mom was in another league, and that when he walked into a room with her on his arm, everyone was like, "Whoa, this guy must be." And my dad was extremely handsome, and once he got to Stuppen, he took care of mom. The whole house would shake, and my mom would be, so all my brothers and sisters were traumatized by all that. Me, I would go there for a week or so and kind of go, "Oh, well, that's interesting." But I remember when I was moved back at 7 because I was supposed to start to go to school. And I was already going to school with my grandma, but he has to go to Catholic school, this Catholic school, because my mom was a super duper politician in the Catholic Church. She was a powerful person in the Roman Catholic Church. My mom, when I was 10, I went to Europe first time with them as my parents' photographer, right? My dad was used to having a photographer. He was a bird colonel. He always had a guy taking pictures of what he did because he said, didn't have a picture, no one would believe your story. So I was their photographer until they died. But anyway, and that's how I became a photojournalist. My dad gave me a Rolleiflex, not a watch, but a camera. And it was one of those you look through, right? You look down, right? You ever see? It's like a square box. It was 2 1/4 film, right? Big negative, so you could stop it way down, and if you had a flash, everything was razor sharp. That was Ouija. I met Ouija at 11 or 12 through Adam Purple, because all these amazing people were either mobsters in that club or they were down in Washington Park in front of NYU, and they had all these concrete tables where people were playing chess, all great world champions, and they were playing for money, right? And they did it on the clock. You make your move, hit the clock, the guy has to, and if the other guy has more time making up his mind, he has to pay, I think it was like $10 for every minute more than the other guy. Even if even if the guy lost, if the guy was moving faster and got into the game by 20 movements, if you didn't win, the game stopped, right? And whoever had less time made more money. That's the way they played, right? And if you won, it was a handshake. It was the clock that you made money on, right? So I kind of was watching this. The first time I kind of strolled into that neighborhood, I said, well, because I went there to sit outside. I went with, I forgot, I think it was Johnny No Neck. I mean, he had no neck. And he looked like, dressed like guys in the Goodfellas, the guys with the mobsters who always wear $200 suit and a tie. Tony he was always relaxed. But anyway, so I went with him, and he said, "Watch these guys," and I'm watching. And by this time, this guy knows that I observe everything. And he goes to me, "So, what do you see?" And I said, "These are some the smartest people I've ever met." And he goes, "Do you know what they're doing?" I said, "Well, they're playing a game called chess." He goes, "You know how to play chess?" And he goes, "Well, I know what it is. I would not say that I am a player." And that's why this guy liked me, because he would take me. He was one of the first people who would take me into things and want my perspective on it, and he valued it. And he'd always give me a $10, and then it was $20, and then Benjamins, right? As I got older. And so that's how I got to see, you know, um, watching the square. And so I'm sitting there, and we got our little sandwiches and our drinks, and we're sitting off to the side where the trees are giving us shade, because all the tables were not in shade. I mean, when the sun went down over buildings, it'd be in shade, but if the sun was up high, everything was in Washington Square was bright, and it had a big, beautiful fountain in the middle. So anyway, we're sitting in the shade, kind of by the fountain, so you can hear the tinkling of water, and we're watching these guys thing. And then this one guy, he goes, "Watch this guy," and Adam Purple, he's always dressed in purple, and you know why I wear the clothes I wear, because that's what Adam did. He was kind of a small guy, and so he can never get any men's clothes unless he wanted to go to the place that down on what street was that? Where all the Jewish tailors were. Thomas Street? Anyway. So over there, right where Manhattan Bridge and the Brooklyn Bridge are. And there's Chinatown over here, Little Italy over here, and Little Israel down there. And so anyway, this, guy who's maybe 5'7" walks up, and he's kind of, he's not like this guy, big. He's, probably he's 5'7". He probably weighs 110, if that, right? But his arms and his legs had muscles like you could not frigging believe, right? And he had really long hair, and this is before anybody had long hair, right? And so it's like, and he's dressed all in purple, and he's dressed in what now or women, not necessarily anything, but like the stretchy pants, and because he wanted people to see the definition of his muscular legs, because he rode bicycles everywhere, right? When he wanted to go to Delaware, he rode his bicycle, and this before anyone was doing anything with bicycles, right? And it wasn't, he didn't have a Schwinn, he didn't have fancy 10-speed. No, he had the bike he built him friggin' self. He had a shop. And the other thing he wanted to show was his schwanz. It was like halfway down to his kneecap, right? And with the kind of ski pants he was wearing, that really tightly clinging clothes, was like, yo. Now, I have a number of friends who always go on about the size of people's schwanz. And they crack jokes and especially farmer guys. All my farmer friends always talking, because I have friends who, have, cows, back in the day, I used to be when I was a little kid, and I stayed with this doctor who got me over my allergies, and all he did was have me sleep in the barn. And he had a number of beef cattle, and he had a number of cows because he liked fresh milk, and he made cheeses. So he wanted to control that. So I milked the cows all the time. I got to know cows really well, and his wife she was a vet and a breeder of cows and dogs, and so I would sleep in the barn with the dogs and the cows, and I got over it because there was every funkiness you could imagine, and I slept amongst it, and shoveled it and took care of everything. And all those animals, because I took care of them. I brushed them, the cows, the dogs, and the cows. I brushed them. I always had a treat in my pocket, and that's why dogs and cows got along real well. So, um, I meet, Adam Purple comes over to meet the mobster because this is the guy who he is the show mobster. He's a mobster who is this is that club's neck of the woods. Now they're not like over there in St. Gennaro's Little Italy, where the mobsters have all these coffee shops and pizza places and they sit out front. No, this is a guy who's really dressed, really. I mean, he is gigantic, but he's not fat. He's in good shape. And he's got like 3 or 4 guns on him, right? That's why I learned, him and the Hoaglands taught me how to shoot a gun. And what guns were. Anyway, so Adam Purple came over, and he how am I doing with juice? Oh, pretty good. And hey, how you doing? And so he sits down, and we start talking, and this guy says, Adam, I want you to meet Al. Al, this is Adam Purple. He is the king. He's known as the king. And I said, so I see that you're playing on the clock. And so I'm like 11 years old, right? And he goes, do you know how to play chess? And I said, well, I know what chess is. And I know the movement of the boards, but I would say I do not know how to play chess. And he goes to the mobster, well, I'm glad you brought this young man here. I've been looking for a guy like him. So my whole life, I had people like that. Right. And now most people who are in church or judgmental would say, how could you hang out with this terrible that guy? He wears women's clothes. And look at that thing on his. Oh, my God. Oh, he's sinful. Oh, well, these guys were the best, most Christ-like people I ever friggin' met. Right. Because the mobster guy, he always had he had a wad of 10s, a wad of 20s, a wad of Benjamins. And he would walk down the street handing people that. I mean, he didn't, like, oh my God, he's a monster. Stay away, he'll kill me. No, they would bow their heads and say thank you, and he would hand and say, Mr. Blah blah blah, and they wouldn't call him by the first name, right? He wasn't a grandfather. He was just a made man, but he was their poster boy. This is where I learned about poster boys, right? And so there, Adam Purple was he says, where do you live? I said, well, my parents live up there, but my grandma lives over there. And I work for Grandpa Stoll. Oh, you know Mike Stoll Sr. and his son Junior? I said, yeah. But Mike, that's why it's Grandpa Stoll and Mike, because Mike got to be called Junior. And Adam starts to laugh. And he goes, so let me show you where I live. So we go down. I said, so aren't you on the clock here? Because now I'm at enough. And I look at the mobster and he goes, yeah, go with Adam, right? And he goes, Adam, have him back by 4:00 because his grandma's going to come and get him, or Mike is going to come and get him, but he's got to be back at the club by 4. So it's like 12:30, and this is a high time of between 12:30 and 6 is Adam's big money time, right? So he walks in. People go, but Mike, Adam, where you going? Where you going? And he goes, I'm taking a break. So we just walk straight down. I don't think it was. There's a little place where it's like a little town, it's a little Dutchiness from Houston up to 16th Street. and that's where they built the Con Ed building, right? It's got the big clock on it. And so, what I think it's 14th Street or 50, it's not quite 16th Street. But anyway, we walk straight down that and we keep going. And then where it dead ends into, I think, 2nd Avenue or the street before 2nd Avenue, this is kind of a little squirrely street that is just kind of goes from Houston up to maybe 16th Street. Anyway, and it defines that little area that was the Nomen, that was the Con Edison. There's a name for it. And Lexington Avenue dead ends right off that street, and there's a hotel there. And I forget the name of that. And that's where Salvatore Dali hung out for most of 30 years of his life. It's where he pushed a piano out the window of the bar there, and I'm Dali, and it's when they were getting ready to have the big modern art show in the what was known as the it's now called MoMA, but it was the it's where the military guys had their place, and you'd have flower shows in it too. So anyway, come to my mind, Armory Show. That's it. See, that's all I have to do. Forget it. Stop. Distract. What instead of this random instead of getting the squirrel going, what is it? What is it? What is it? What? I say something else, and then I was taught how to do that, right? By this lady called Evelyn Wood. She had the Evelyn Wood speed reading course. You also had Evelyn Wood memory course, right? And she, Rudolf Steiner was her buddy. So I was, when I got murdered at 7 by a Nazi nun and then spent 18 months with the Maryknoll's, their whole teaching modality was Evelyn Wood and Rudolf Steiner. So all of this story that I've just told you over the last hour or so is kind of what I told, because when I last left you in Ireland, when my mom came from, and my dad came from those Celts that were on the islands off of Sicily, and my parents came together. So my mom, she grew up. My mom's those Irish folk who came to the New World. They came before the famine. They came, a little when the Dutch took over New York, New Amsterdam. That's when they came here because they were working for those bankers. So they came with those guys, and not like in down in the hole, but in first class with nice clothes, and they were working for those guys. And my great grandfather kind of realized he could just be another, middle managed guy. And he, at some point, when they didn't need him, because he was Irish, but he had saved up a lot of gold and power through knowledge of people's stuff that he decided to take the whole family and just went up the hut. He bought a barge and a that had it was more a navigable barge, a big flat boat that had sails on it, right? And he had horses. He was one of the first guys to do this. So he first took a sailboat up the Hudson and then came back, and he had this idea: we're going up there. He got himself this big flatboat, which is what they used in New York City, because New York City was like Venice. It had channels and waterways all over the place, like up in Queens. It was like Venice. And so he bought one of these flatboats that had sails that were meant to go up and down the Hudson. And he went all the way up as far. At first, he took the sailboat that was kind of quick and fast, and it went all up and saw where it was. And along the thing, there were little towns, and he stopped and talked to people, and he found some interesting folk. He said, "Would you like to work for me? I'm going to go way." Well, that's you really want to go up there? That's where the the Iroquois Nation is, the Mohawks, the Iroquois, all of the 11 tribes, and it's not our land anymore, it's their land. And he said, no, we're gonna look for guys. And are the crazy guys who go up there for furs, and for one man thing on a boat that you canoe, you can do pretty, and that's what those towns were there to buy those furs and give those guys stuff, right? So he said, no, I'm going to go up further. So he went all the way up as far as he could go. He kind of found one place that was a natural kind of harbor landing point, had a beach, and kind of put his boat there. And he had this guys who were loggers, carpenters, hunters, guys who could shoot well, so to protect, and farmers and people who knew that neck of the woods, could speak the lingo. So, right, and he still had his whole family back there, but he took his brother and two other guys that were his tight cadre, and got this crew, and went up there and did this, and went there, and built, a thing that boats could dock at, right, way up there, right, almost near, where they, Hudson stops being the Hudson and then goes into the tributaries, right, and then he cuts out logs, right, and drags them he had big draft horses, and brings them into the river, and just kind of makes an island of these things, right, before he builds his big dock. And so he's got all these trees, and he's got them in the water, and he builds a kind of sawmill to make lumber, and he starts building stuff there. And one day, the big island of logs breaks away in a storm, and he basically gets a bunch of guys, and it's already out in the Hudson. The Hudson's heading towards New York, and they're on there, and they are like, got big poles, and they start lashing everything so the trees don't go every which way. It's just the big island again, and they get all the way down, a little more than halfway to the big whatever town that was, where there was a lumber, a sawmill, right, that was cutting up stuff to bring it into New York. And they were just cutting down the trees that they've been cutting down, not big humongous trees like this, but and this island of trees nearly crashed into the sawmill. And the sawmill guy said, "Wow, where'd you get these trees?" And he goes, "I have a place." And he goes, "I'd like to buy them from you." And my great grandfather says, "Well, what do you want to pay?" And the guy goes, $1 a tree, which is like $100 now, right? And he goes, "Oh, what I want is 50 cents, which is like $50 in gold," because everyone had script, and this was this guy's script, right? Larry's script, right? They didn't have English script, they didn't have American script, they had everybody's script, right? They said 50 cents in gold, and and if you. And so let's say there were 1,000 trees there, because it was like a gigantic island, right? It was like almost a mile long, and not quite, it was narrow, it's not wide enough to get stuck as the river. So now he realizes he can do this, and he says to the guy, "Okay," and the guy goes, "Sure," right? So because nobody wants Larry's script, everyone's free if they have gold. That's the minimum. So he gets about literally, $500,000 worth of gold. So he had his little fast, nice sailboat. Now his family and everybody is still in New York, and his sons are like taking his place in the banking business for the Dutch, right? While he's doing this, right? So he goes down, and one of his sons is now ensconced in this new thing called the stock market. He gives half that money to that son to invest, and the other son, who is involved in real estate, because they're now starting to slice up, Manhattan. New York City was just, lower Manhattan, right, from the Battery up to about 21st Street. And it was all little farms and little roads and everything. And that's why go to New York City, everything below Houston, Soho stands for south of Houston, and Tribeca is triangle between canal. So anyway, he gives another quarter of that to his son to buy real estate in Manhattan. He says, and start buying stuff up on the east side and west side of up there, right? And he does, right? And so he then gives another quarter to his wife and says, okay, honey, I want you to start investing go into the Irish community and start investing in people who look like they're hard workers and they want a shot at it, right? And that's his giving back, right? Plus, he knows if he can build a constituency of that kind of people, he's going to do something big up there, and he's going to need people, hardworking go-getters like this. And that's what he wanted his wife. And his wife was really his better half. She was the real sharp business person. She was the one who said, we should go. He got this boat and they went up there for a lark. And she goes, this is where our future is, up here. Right? Anyway, so, she's doing that. The boys are doing that. He turns around, goes back up, and these guys, again, are cutting down trees and making the island. And he's going, this is what we're going to make money on at first. And so they start doing that. And the lumber yard that was there, his son in the stock market hits it. It's just starting, and it's in one of those boom bust, zip kind of things. It's my great that the stock market is doing great, and his son is doing great, and so he gets on the sailboat, goes back to Manhattan, goes there and says, okay, sonny boy, what you need to do is you need to start an office in this stock market. It's obvious this is going to be very successful, but it's obviously like all the other markets in history, it's going to go up and down. It's like gambling. So our whole thing is we're going to bet on the sure things, let it go as high as it can, and we don't have to go to the tippy top, but where we make 1,000 times what we put into it, that's good enough for us. We sell it all for gold. Right? So he tells his son to do that. Take some money, get a piece of property through your other brother. What kind of properties so right there. So they get this really nice, that's just far enough from and not on Wall Street, but over on Hudson River, and they put a dock out there, and they become a trading company, right? And part of it is the stock market. That's trade, right? And they will also invest, right? That's part of trade, right? So that's their thing: investing, stock market, and stuff coming down the river and selling into the market, right? So, and that's the first 18 months, right? And so he then takes a tremendous chunk of gold and he takes it up into on a sale thing, and he buys that sawmill that's on the Hudson River, right? And he says, I want to buy this from you. I want to own it 100% straight out, but I still want you to run it. And I want you to take a third of whatever we make. And then I want you to take 1/3 of that third and give it to my son down in the stock market, he calls it the market, down in the market. Right? I think he calls it a trading post, but down in the trading post in Manhattan, in New Amsterdam. And how are we doing on the juice? Well, we're gonna have to quit soon. So he does that. The other third, he goes, I want you to go. You keep 1/3. 1/3 you invest in our trading post. The other third, I want you to find another spot like this to build another sawmill, right? and make it logistically where it's not getting in the way of this one. Don't do it right next to it, but a little further up, a little further down, a little on the other side, whatever. And I want you to take that third and buy at least 5 locations, like 1,000 acres. That may even have trees on it that we can cut down and turn into lumber. But I want you to do that, right? And now you have 4 sons, right? And one you have as a lawyer, right? So I want you to take 1/3, a fifth of your third and invest into him and start a law practice. That will be our law practice for everything. I'm going to be half of it. Your son will be half of it, right? And I will constantly be putting our money and our authority into his pocket, to do our lawyering, right? And so when you buy those properties, he's the guy cut his teeth on making those deals, right? And so so all of this is happening, and this is all coming from his wife. His wife is a smart one, my mother's great grandmother. She's a smart one, and so and she's German. She's the Steinbeck, right? And so basically, but they were called something else. But it was still in that crew of Germans. They were, Alsace-Lorraine, I think. So, and Germany is like, 10 little countries. And that's why Germany is really strong and why it's really weak all at the same time. And why they fight amongst each other. But they're very fun. The Germans are very fun people. So anyway, let's see. How are we doing for battery? Probably about 15, 20 minutes. So the empire is set. So he goes back up, and they are moving an island, so within another 18 months, they have 6 of the largest sawmills on the East Coast, right? And in Queens and on the New Jersey side of the Hudson, they have gigantic mills that are turning that lumber into things like furniture and doors and great beams and lumber, right? And then they all through Manhattan and all through all the boroughs and all up and down the East Coast, they have lumber yards and hardware that makes Lowe's look like nothing, right? And then they get invest in transportation, and so everything was by rivers, by where everything could be fed either through the Atlantic and so a lot of the wood that was going down into the South, especially down into South Carolina, was going in the Atlantic, right? And so they had all this shipping, they had all this banking, they had all this investment, they had all these resources of trees and everything because they went into partnership with the Iroquois nation, right? And they were the ones who rented New York State from the Iroquois. Conquer them like the English and the French and the Spanish did. They rented it, right? And had a admiralty law. All our law, it's not the Constitution. That's a joke. All our law, our corporate law, our everything law, your birth certificate is all admiralty. That's why my name is Sensei Al Bob. I don't have a slave name. I don't have the name that's on my birth certificate. And I was fine. That's why I knew he did it. He took all those documents. I knew. John does that. He's like that squirrel that breaks in your house and steals your car keys, right? He doesn't even know he's doing it. And well, that one of his personalities knows he's doing it. And so John, and again, why do I talk about John? Why is John even in this story? Because he represents this antecedent that is like unfreaking believable. So last time I was there, before he threw me out, I was helping him fix things. He had broken. Oh, please, why don't work? Oh, the electricity, blah 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 blah. Come, blah 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 blah. You can stay, you can play here forever, blah blah blah. Right? It was like, okay. So I did, and because I had other things I wanted to do. This is the last time I've been there, right? So, and I went for it was around Thanksgiving, and I went, and his mother invited me for Thanksgiving, and she wanted me. They had some property in New York City. She wanted me to go up there, but and she said I could go up, and that would be fun to go live in New York. They had some properties in kind of near Tony Soprano on Staten Island, and and so I was, and she said, "It's a real mess." I said, "Well, go and clean it up and fix whatever needs to be fixed up." And so I spent 3 days and nights with them over the Thanksgiving vacation. And I wanted John to basically come and be with his family because he hadn't seen them at all. And he hasn't seen his kids in 10 years, or 8 years or 7 years or whatever many years it's been. He's been divorced from Danica for probably a good 15 years. So anyway, the thing about John at that point. So he gets me up there, and see, I can go all over the place, but come back to why I bring. So John, I don't know why he does this, but he's living there. He gets all his food shipped up to, has the supermarket deliver it, right? And he spends about $500 every time. I mean, that's like what I spend on food in 3 years. I basically spend somewhere around $70 a month on food. And that includes, going to a coffee shop so I can talk to you, right? $70, right? And so he would buy mountains of toilet paper, mountains, right? The big blocks of like 40 rolls in a block, he'd get like 10 of them, right? And these people would just, leave it, and I'd start taking it out. And so I would like go through it, and all the crap, all the sodas and energy drinks and boxes of Little Debbie's and white bread and all the stuff I knew about, but whatever few vegetables he bought or whatever, stuff of that nature he would buy, I would kind of, and I was, that 4 weeks I was there, I kind of had a car full of food, right, from the churches and other places. And so I was using my food to eat because that was the food I could eat and not the crap he was buying. But all of this toilet paper, right? So, he had 5 of these like 40 roll blocks. And, I took a razor knife and cut one, and I took a third of one of those blocks and just put it by the toilet where I was, right? And now I lived, before I sold this place to John, I lived there for a good, let's see, I bought the place in '03. I sold it to John in 15. So that's 12 years, right? So I knew everything about that place, the good, the bad, the ugly. And George, he was an artist, a sculptor of amazingness. The building's amazing, shape, form. But plumbing, I mean, he wired the stuff with 22 gauge phone wire. It's like, now he was smart in that he could do it because he lit everything up with fluorescent light, which takes no current. So phone wire is not a problem. But to try and plug a toaster oven, like the girl who rented a place and burnt the top of it off, and George, he was understand insurance. He let those people do that shit and says, hey, don't do that. He did it because it burnt the top of the school off, and he got more money than he ever saw in insurance. Anyway, but that's another story. But John, he probably uses 2 rolls every time he craps himself, right? And so he's kind of like he's incontinent. And so I don't know if he wears diapers, but he talks about shit so much that there's something going on there. So anyway, so I'm there, and the toilet is backing up, right? And he starts screaming, you destroyed it. It's all blocked up. The water's coming out of my toilet upstairs, right? And it's like, so he comes in. I have 3 rolls of toilet paper, right? And I have a paper bag because this is what I did. I would crap down the toilet. That's the only thing that goes down. Whatever's coming out of your body goes on the toilet. Toilet paper, you throw in a paper bag and then you burn it. Because if you are putting toilet paper down your toilet, you're going to have to pump your septic system out at least once a year of all that toilet paper, right? Well, he's used so much toilet paper, he clogs it up like you can't believe. So when I put the well in there, I put a thing, an outdoor spigot, right by the school. So if I want to use water outside, there it is. I don't have to get it from inside, right? So anyway, the thing gets he called some, not Roto-Rooter, but some guy even much better, because what this guy had a beautiful Mercedes van with a robot machine, um, Smooth Move, I think it was called, and had a big roll of hose, and at the end of the hose was this stainless steel snaky thing, and all he did was put the the um, the hose down the thing, and he had this wireless little thing that he could watch like I think it was his cell phone, but he could control. See, it had a light and a TV camera, and he could control forward movement or going this way. And the stream of water it shot out was harder than a jet engine. So he just, and blow the shit out. So first he blows the shit out, from the house to the septic system, and he gets that to move, and then he starts going up through the house. And as he's blowing it out, it's the shit is coming out because George used old plumbing septic lines, cast iron, which he didn't know how to connect, and he just stuck them together. And when the stuff would flow, not a problem, but when it was clogged up, so shit was coming out of everywhere, right? Out of the walls, out of the ceiling, out of anything that was connected, out of the kitchen sink. John comes out screaming and yelling, "Oh, it's coming out!" Blah, blah, blah. And I had a choice. I had left a big wet vac there, and I could either videotape it on my camera because it was just amazing. The shit was coming out of every. I just painted that wall. It's a hard piece. Oh, I worked so hard, 20 hours a day. Oh, and then he'd run up, and the guy would look at me and just go like this, and he's about to unroll, to leave. I said, no, no, please finish this. I'll keep him away from you. And he goes, here, and he hands me this tool that is it looks like a golf club, and it has this snaky thing. And again, you put it into the toilet, and it's bent so it goes through the curlicue and into the septic line, and you hit this button, and the snaky thing goes all the way down, right? And so he takes my little cell phone, he puts the app on it, so now I'm looking at the septic line, and it's like a hair dryer. It's blowing air down and pushing the shit down, right? And he's got the little other sucky one onto that thing. So now the shit is stopped coming out of the walls. Anyway, so there are 3 places up there where John is that I had to keep going up and doing it. So I basically, do one, leave it up there, go down, talk to the guy. He shows me this, go up and go do this. I go up there. Anyway, I do that. And so at a certain point, John freaks totally out. The guy isn't totally done, but he's done where things are moving. But he wants to really get it done, go back and squirt every square inch so it's going to really be a smooth move instead of just a flow, right? So John screams out, get out of my house. I worked so hard here. I did blah, blah, blah. You messed it up, blah, blah. And I had been going, not only was I up there with the device pushing it down so the guy could push it out, I was going around downstairs with the vacuum cleaner, making sure because I was down there, I didn't want to live amongst all that shit. So I sucked it up where it was coming out so it didn't go all over the floors. And anyway, so the guy leaves, and John's like totally psychotic, screaming, yelling, get out, get out, get out. And I said, sure, John, but I've been fixing all this other stuff. Nothing works. You want to sell it for $1 million? Well, okay. Well, can you finish it right now? I said, no, John, it'll take me at least a week. Right. So he I said, John, have you eaten anything today? Well, and I looked down, and on the floor are like 4, big plastic bags that Wonder Bread came in, and a big gallon jug of olive oil that's half gone. And that was the stuff that was bought just yesterday. And so, but his binging thing is to take Wonder Bread and put it in olive oil and just stuff it in his mouth. And that's what comes out of his butt in a way that I don't even want to envision. And that's why he uses like 6 rolls every time, um, it comes flying out his butt. So anyway, so I make him a real meal. And I probably made John 1,000 really good meals. Vegetarian, really good, not mass produced, not something that comes in plastic, but real food, like his mother would, right? And you saw, I don't know if any of you guys saw his mother trying to make him a meal, and he was screaming at her, right? It was like pretty amazing. And he does all these shows, and if anyone even comments, they say, "What are you nuts? What are you?" And then he takes it off. So me, I leave every show I ever put on, whether you can get at it or not, because for some reason, you can probably watch 500 of my shows, and that's more than enough. There's probably another 1,500 up there in there. I can see them when I go to my place where I can control my dashboard or whatever. I can see every show is there. But for some reason, YouTube, either through its algorithm, only shows everybody out there, the one that everyone, that has, 80, 90, 100,000 looks, you know. But anyway, so I'm cooking him a meal, and I go downstairs, and I kind of, and I'm cooking a meal upstairs because downstairs is full of shit, and I've kept the shit apocalypse from happening, but there's still a lot of shit down, especially in the kitchen, right? So I'm gonna have to really clean that kitchen up because all the pipes were on the ceiling up there that George put in, and it was oozing out down onto the stove, and it was not pretty. And anyway, but I kept the apocalypse from happening, and so I'm cooking my meal up there, and I go in the bathroom, and he goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, got to use the toilet." And the one down, the place is covered in shit down there, until I clean it up. And he goes, "Well, be careful." And so I go in there, and the little device the man gave me that probably cost $300 or $400, you know, was there in the bathroom. And the guy wanted to leave so fast, he didn't take a look around everything and see if he had left anything. And so I make the meal. My phone rings. I said, "Smooth Move guy." He goes, "Hey, I left a few things up there." "Yeah, I see the snaky thing and the this thing and the that thing." He goes, "Yeah." He goes, I'm going to need those. Are you coming down?" I said, "You know what? I'm going to grab all this stuff, and I will be down at the supermarket down at the bottom of the hill. Where are you?" He goes, "Well, I'm over in this neighborhood, and yeah, I'm right by that place. How about in 3 hours?" And then it would have been maybe 4 o'clock. "How about I meet you there?" And I go to him, "Sure, no problem." He goes, you are a great guy. I could have never. And John paid him probably 10 times more, because in cash, because that's what John does. And the guy goes, "Well, but the guy was going, 'Well, I've been through so much shit with this guy. I'll take it." And so anyway, so I say, "Okay, I'll see you in 3 hours." I go upstairs, and I'm looking around for the stuff that I might put, not in the bathroom, but over by the front door. I leaned it over there, and the other things he had left, I kind of piled up there. And I go up there, and I made him, we haven't eaten a meal together, and John basically, the door is locked, and I knock on the door, and so I haven't eaten anything, and I wanted to have a meal with him, and then get that stuff and to the place, and I knock on the door, and it's locked. And I said, John, and I knock on the door, no answer. Knock on the door, there's a log right by the front door. I pick it up and I whack the door, so you can definitely hear. If I was downstairs in the basement, I didn't break anything, didn't hurt anything, but I hit the door with a log, so it was like ringing the apartment, like a drum, right? And so he screams, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" I said, John, let me in." "Oh, what? Who are you? You're after me. You're a demon." And I said, "John, no, it's me, Al. The meal that you have on the. There is no meal." I said, "Well, John, I want the guy who just cleaned out your septic system, he left a few stuff there, and I put it right by the door. Why don't you just hand it to me through the door? Because I'm going to take it down to him. He goes, there's no stuff here. I said, what are you talking about? He said, no stuff here. I said, and I described it. He said, no. And then he went from the screaming, yelling John to Jimmy. He went, there's no, I'm just Jimmy here. There's no, I don't know. And he'd say, hee, I'm just Jimmy. I don't know as well. I don't know you. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just Jimmy. That's John. And that whole scenario that I just described to you is the most poetic metaphor of what the human race is doing to this planet. John Birmingham, I know it's tough. I know it's sickening, but if everyone in the world were to watch that show, they would vomit up all of their anxiety and fear and self-loathings and, we have to change, or otherwise we're going to be like this guy, right? So that's why when people say, why are you with, right? And that's why I call him the patron saint of misery, right? Did you get your box back from? Nope, never. Yep. And the photos of Grace. Yep, exactly. John has all of that stuff, right? And he's put it on his show and said it was his grandparents. I mean, that whole story of the and my mother's great grandparents, they were the original what do you call those guys? Something criminals, Gilded Edge criminals. There's a term that's historically known for those guys, because and that's why New York State. So John, said, well, my family is nobility Italians. It's like, well, pretty much everybody in Italy was either a slave or nobility. And he doesn't tell the real story about his grandfather. His grandfather was unbelievable. His mother's father came to America with nothing. He was a musician. And he loved jazz. So he was, in Tin Pan Alley making music and had a band, and then had a big band and was famous. He was like Benny Goodman, but on the lower end, he was Italian. So, but he did very well. And then he realized he wasn't going to be Benny Goodman, so he went to college in America, became an engineer, and he worked with a company that built the Seagram's building and the United Nations. He was in charge of the engineering. Seagram's building is the building that changed architectural dynamics in the world, right? In New York City. Instead of looking like a medieval spear, it was, something really different, a glass box, And that you go look at, so he was the engineer of that. So there was an architect for it, and he got all the credit, but John's grandfather was the guy who put it together. And architects know nothing. Engineers are the key, and trades are the key. And so that's an amazing story. And how he brought his John's mom, her family, and all of that. That's an amazing story, right? And now John's father is a bastard, and was a bastard in Ireland, and he was brought to New York City because John's grandfather was the chief of police in New York City, and he wanted a son, so he bought one from Ireland. It was like irishbastard.com. He went online and like John would buy a bastard. And so, and I knew John's father before John was frigging born, because I was involved in the anti-war movement. And when we would demonstrate, I had friends, I grew up in Harlem, and then I knew everybody, through Grandpa Stoll. So I knew a lot of people. So when I was involved in that, and I was, the organizing took place up there. If you ever listen to George Carlin's, shows or all the things, but he grew up exactly where I grew up, the same neighborhood. He went to the same school I went to, right? The school that my grandma, as like a 3-year-old, she would just drop me off there, and I would, hang out in the library with a librarian, and that was an amazing school. So George Carlin tells that story way better than I do, but that's the school I first went. My first school was up there in Harlem, over on the west side. And there was a big cathedral up there, and the guy who was in charge of it was just, it's, he was, I think it's Methodist or Protestant or some flavor of that, Christian. But he was open to everyone, black, white, gay. You could be extraterrestrial. And any social movement, he backed. If you needed a place to have a meeting, you know, because in New York it was called, within the blacklisting of anything, to get any kind of footage. And this guy was always there. And one of the reasons why the black movement of the '60s, it was all on their nickel, all the organizing, but he brought Christian folk to the party, right? So that guy was another one of my mentors, right? And so, and that was Harlem. I grew up around people who did stuff, who had a dream, who moved. And so John's family are those people, right? So, and if you want to go see who John's family is, go watch the movie Gangs of New York. And in the beginning, it opens with this Dutch guy screaming at the sky. He's got the big house on top of the hill. It's, New York City and not Nottingham Hills. But he's like the boss. But he's about to die. I mean, I think in that scene, he comes out and screams at the world and dies. And that's the end of the Dutch rule, right? And so there are all these Irish there. And it cuts to this very wealthy Dutch crowd in a wagon, their carriage, big fancy horses, big, gold leaf carriage, and they get brought down to the Five Corners, and they stop, and it's this wooden sidewalk, and the thing stops right there. Everything else is just, crap and mud and nothing you would want to step into. And so these people gingerly get out of the carriage and step onto the wooden sidewalk that has been placed there by a man in uniform. He's an Irish policeman that there is no municipality. It's just Tammany Hall, and that they aren't voted in. They are just gangsters, right? So if you want to see who John Birmingham's grandfather was, is watch that movie and see that policeman, that Irish policeman. So he asked the Dutch guy, "Hey, give me your gun." Not a gun. Give me your watch. You got a gold watch? Oh yes, you're from France. It's Switzerland. It's the best. And so the Irish guy hangs it on a nail on the post supporting these steps that are going up, right? And and the guy goes, "What are you doing?" He says, "Well, I'm putting this on here, and I just want to show that you have nothing to worry about, because I'm going to leave this here, and we're going to go up." And the camera cuts back, and you see the thing that he's hanging on. It's supposed that's got a sign over these steps that say "The Liberal Way." And these people were liberals, right? They go up the steps, they go on this elevated thing that they're like, 3 meters above everybody else, and they're looking and everyone, "Oh, this is so terrible. Oh, someone should do something about this." They said something. They're those people are in misery because of the money these Dutch folk are making, right? So, and that was the Gilded Age, right? And we're in the Gilded Age again. We go in and out of the Gilded Age, right? And robber barons. That was the coin. The phrase that described my mother's great grandparents was the robber barons. Right? They took all of that wood. They made this deal with as Dutch. Well, they were Irish, but the Dutch made this deal with the Indians that they would rent the state, not conquer it, not being responsible for anything, but they could take anything they wanted. And that was and that's why New York State is the only state that doesn't have national forests or national campgrounds and stuff. Well, battery's about to die, so I think that's 2 hours and something minutes. 4 thumbs up. So how about some more thumbs up? How about some comments? And those folks who have commented so far, thank you very much. Did you get so? you can't. John steals shit. You're never gonna get it back, right? And so what I get from John is he is the most amazing. Like I said, he is the poster boy of the spiritual. He is the the patron saint of spiritual misery. That's John. Praise Jesus, praise God, praise Jesus, praise God, praise Jesus, praise Jesus. Okay, gotta go. Praise Jesus, praise God.